Hey, what's up, everybody? BDF 44 coming into another video. All right, so I'm doing another therapy session. This is the third one in a row or something like that. I don't know. I've been kicking those out lately, but to be honest with you, they're not. I don't know if they're really therapy sessions. I just ain't labeling them anything else. It's a laziness about myself to just make something a therapy session when I don't feel like coming up with a title, and I know it ain't no basketball related topic. Yeah, I tend to do that, but I guess this will be that. I figured my Kareem Abdul-Jabbar should have been a therapy session too, along the lines of that in my video, but nah, I wanted him to see that. I hope that when I address something to somebody, that it gets to them. I want them to see that. I want you to see that too. Go back and check that video out. It was important to me. But anyway, today I'm laughing, man. I woke up this morning. It's like 6 in the morning. I'm laughing at Senator Kennedy from Louisiana. That dude. I don't know who advised him to make his commercial the way that he did. Obviously, in the South, there's a lot of people who would support the type of rhetoric that he was saying. Essentially, he got on TV with a campaign ad essentially saying that, he doesn't support the early release of criminals. He doesn't support the defunding of police. And if you have a problem with the police just because they're police, when you get in trouble next time, don't call them, call a crackhead. And that was offensive to many because it implies a certain thing. When you say crackhead, it's crack is something that's found in black people's neighborhoods. It's not something that's often found in other communities, even though it's universal. People take it all over. When you think of a crackhead, the stereotype is 100% an African American. Now, if he would have said some drugs in general or meth or something like that, it would have had an entirely different implication. Had he used the word meth, it would have immediately sent us in a direction that had us thinking about white people. So these things, certain drugs are attached to certain groups and stereotypes, and we understand that, and I believe his marketing team understood that fully. I think they were plucking at the heartstrings of the racists in their state. If I'm being completely honest with you, Louisiana is in the South, and we know the South has had long racist roots that some of which they have not let go of. So, he's appealing to that. His marketing team is appealing to that, and they know who their audience is. But I always say this is a parallel. We talk about parallels a lot on this channel. When you only think your audiences are paying attention to you, in 2022, you're being naive, because once something's on the internet, it can be taken from an entirely different person, sent to an entirely different audience, and provided to them in a context of that person's choosing. So when you let something out, for all you know, just because you was trying to reach the people of Louisiana, only the people who really focus on it are the people in Los Angeles. It's that kind of thing. So it's like, yeah, maybe he should have had a little more sensitivity as to how he came off, based on the fact that he's a public figure nationally, and that the tone from which he spoke ostracized a good portion of his country. Now, taking either position on such a situation will ostracize somebody, but I would imagine ostracizing the people who don't mind being by themselves, like racists, who take a stance against everybody else, that's where they should be left, in my humble opinion. If you're trying to appeal to the wide public, you probably shouldn't line up with them. But it is what it is. He is who he is. I hate to be the guy that reinforces stereotypes of my own, but I think every representative of every corner needs to understand how they reinforce negative stereotypes. And I think Senator Kennedy, no exception. He reinforced a stereotype about people who look like him, speak like him, attaching a racist tone to himself. I would not appreciate that if I were somebody who belonged to his group. I wouldn't appreciate that at all. No different than I don't appreciate being misrepresented by people who look like myself. So that's something that doesn't get enough conversation in general when we're talking about non-black people, although it gets all the conversation when we're talking about black people. I think it's time to start having that conversation about white people as well. You reinforce negative stereotypes when you line yourself up next to people who hate, period. So that's something that needs to be said, whether you harbor those feelings or not. Once you stand next to those people, you will be next to those people. No different than I would in my groups and my circumstances. I think at the end of the day, racism is something that a lot of people have their religious beliefs attached to, and because of it, there's no reasoning with a lot of it. There's no getting to the root of it and finding some common love. No, it's meant to keep people at odds with one another, and the only thing it's meant to boil down to is murder and war. If you really want to know what I think of racism, that's its only purpose, is to lead people straight to that. However they get to that, that's where it's leading. It's the only place it goes. And that's what I think of racism. I think it leads to the death of our species. I really do believe that. Because it leaves absolutely no room for reason, and it leaves no room for trust. It leaves no room for compromise, and it leaves no room for being able to lay one's head down at night and rest when you know you're hated for irrational reasons by people who are not insane. You understand what I'm saying? A calculated, stable-minded, and logical thinking individual hates you for reasons that are not logical at all. How can you rest? And that's the type of thing that a mind like mine lives with every day when I surmise what racism actually is. Not just limited to racism, but classism and all these different isms that keep people apart, that don't allow people to be able to look one another in the eye and find a common ground. When you have too many of those things, the only functionality of those things is to deteriorate humanity and harmony. I really believe that. And if we understand that for what it is, then we realize that people were using that energy to make themselves feel better, to boost themselves politically and power-wise in times when it seemed necessary to do so. And if you look around with the advent of the internet and the way we move around and all how fast we are to get from place to place and how well we are able to communicate from far away with one another, then we understand that those tactics that were used to keep people in place and in power and to keep people feeling like they had a strength about themselves, we have learned why none of that is necessary anymore, why that energy is bad for our respective groups now. We've learned these things. Those people didn't know the lessons that we've learned over time, which is why they behaved the way that they did. We don't have that excuse. We got science, we got history, we got communication, we got all these different things that help us understand why being racist doesn't work. If you want to engage in that type of thinking, you're going to be working against the grain as it pertains to the building of what it is that we're going to be. Because people are going to continue to become family over time, and I say this a lot, this is not the first time I said this. People are going to continue to live and mate, and as they do, people that you hate may end up being your kin tomorrow. A lot of us won't be alive to see that. In fact, all of us won't be alive to see that. So I don't think we care. But we should. Because we pride ourselves on being people who want to leave people behind. You know what I mean? We want to leave life on earth. We want to keep the ball rolling as it pertains to what it is that we are. But that we leave so much without consideration, so much without thought behind for those people to pick up the pieces of, just like our ancestors did to us with the hatred and the racism and the wars. They left us with these conundrums that we can't do nothing with. So now we're looking at each other saying we're supposed to know better. You're supposed to know better. You're supposed to do better. You're supposed to think this, that, or the third. We're just trying to simply pick up the pieces they left us with, and that is what I'm speaking against right now. Let's not leave those for our kids. Let's not leave the same low frequency energy and pointless wars and pointless interaction. Let's leave that stuff here. Let's give our kids an understanding that they too should look at themselves as future family, as people who may mate with one another even though you're on different sides today. Your kids may know each other tomorrow. Your grandkids may be friends with their grandkids tomorrow, and your war no longer makes sense. Your racism no longer is a true definition of what it is that you're even looking at. The people you hate are you. The people you love are gone. This is what life does. People breed, people come together. Cultures emerge. So why are we so stuck on our cultures being separate when it's inevitably going to stay? They're going to inevitably come together because we're on one slab of land. We can't get far enough away from one another to assure that that doesn't happen. Don't y'all get it? We're still floating around on the same earth. So people are going to, no matter what, as long as time keeps going, your family and my family, they're destined to meet someday. Yeah, we're different today. But we share a great grandson who doesn't remember our problems, who doesn't even know of our issues. He just prays to his ancestors. And do you know who he's talking to? Both of us. Both of us. And the Lord, the one who exists, the one I believe in, has allowed me to understand that in real time. In a time where that's not promoted, thought about, or even considered. Because everybody, and I mean it seems to me, everybody is focused on now. As if it is forever when I've lived through so many fleeting moments, have worn so many hats that I've taken off till I know that no moment stays the same. No idea stays the same, no moment stays the same, no interaction stays the same, none of it. Tradition is held until it becomes a situation where people are tired of said tradition and it just gets dropped away. Traditions that are held for thousands of years get dropped overnight by a generation that just decides to say, nah, I'm doing something else. I've met somebody else that gave me a different culture. I don't need the old ways of that old culture. That's how it works. So that thing you're holding on to, that thing that you live for and die for, that block that you want to live and die for, that political side that you love so much, all of it will get blurred over time. None of it truly matters at all. But what does matter is the interactions that you have with the people around you, because that will determine the domino effects of the energy that is left behind over time. Butterfly effects, so to speak. My nice thing says something that can maybe make somebody feel good, can make somebody else say something nice to somebody, make them feel good. And bad? Well, bad works the same way. It works the same way. I just don't think you can't go nowhere as a nation when you're separate as a people. You're only gonna go so far, man. You're only gonna go so far. So all this talk about ignoring people's perspectives because they're on another side of the fence or on a different side of the room. For example, Kennedy looking at someone like myself saying call a crackhead because you don't trust the cops, when we have so many instances where people like myself were shot unjustly by the cops. Sometimes when they call them, you're going to ignore my point of view just because it doesn't fit the narrative of the people that you're talking to. That's what I'm talking about. It's not just your audience you're talking to. You reach me too, and guess what? I heard what you had to say, and I got plenty to say back to it. This is how that works. I'm not calling a crackhead. I'm not calling the cops either. I don't feel safe with either. Does my perspective not matter? That's what I say to a guy like Kennedy. He's only talking to his own people. He's talking to people who agree with his nonsense, but the people who agree with his nonsense need to hear a different side of his story. They need to understand realities that are not in front of them. They need to understand that their side of the room ain't the side of the room that we're on. And that if they were on our side of the room, they would understand the logic behind what it is that we're talking about. We're talking about survival. See, the people who he's talking about are afraid of the crackheads. We're afraid of the cops. You see what I'm saying? We know the crackheads. Crackheads are neighbors. Crackheads are cousins. Crackheads are moms. Crackheads are dads. Our sisters, brothers. Those who the crackheads are in these situations. The cops are people outside of our neighborhood who don't care about us, who fear us, who think we're all crackheads in a lot of instances, who are trained to see us as threats. And we're supposed to call them for our troubles? I heard of an incident just yesterday, where a lady called the cops because some people had done some things they had no business doing. And the people who were there to help protect her were the first ones the cops came in and draw the guns on. They had apprehended the person that she had called them for, But when they got upstairs, they still apprehended more people that were there to protect her from the person that she was calling it on. They put them in cuffs. Why? Because they was black and she was white. And that was it. For no other reason. They already had the person they were looking for. She had told them these were people that she called to protect her just like they were. They didn't care. Because they were trained to view certain images a certain way. And I understand this. And that training, that is where the evil is. If you really want to know where the root of most of these issues are, it starts with that. Because the same people who are training their cops that way, they're attached to the same people who dreamt up, and I say this with a whole lot of confidence, dreamt up the environment for which a lot of that takes place. The crackheads, how the hell you think they got the crack? The crack came there because of individuals like Kennedy who hated us enough to put poison in our environments. And then scurry away and talk to his people and say, see, look at them, the crackheads, they're nonsense, they blah, blah, blah. No. You sat in a room and dreamt up the environments from which we're in. You had funded that. You and your cronies funded that. Over time, and that is why we have so much poverty and suffering in our neighborhoods, because that was something that was created for us by people who had the money and power and means to reach us with those things. Initiated our failure by sending us things that we couldn't do nothing but die from. And they scurry away and tell the world that we are as bad as they've made us. Tell us to have accountability. I hear all this talk about balance. 400 years of imbalance. And then from that point, you want to start talking about balance. It's just evil. It's nothing short of evil. Call a crackhead. We're supposed to call the oppressor. Which is it? Do we call the poisoned or the poisoners? Which is it, Kennedy? See, from your side of the room and the things that you're guarding against, you can call the cops because you don't never have to worry about them doing anything to you that isn't just. They're going to show up, they're going to protect you, they're going to protect you from us, and that's their job. Problem is, I'm not after you at all. In fact, from where I'm sitting, you're after me. And always have been. That's why these conversations are so necessary for me to speak on, because this is in me. This resentment, this frustration, this feeling unsafe, that's 100% all day, every day for this brain as it pertains to this environment and this subject. Because when you're aware of Black Wall Street, you're aware of Tulsa, you're aware of these different situations that have taken place, you're aware of slavery, you're aware of all of this different stuff that they don't want to talk about or they try to blur the lines on. The latest thing about slavery now is telling everybody that everybody owns slaves. Black people sold black people to slavery. Native Americans own slaves. Black people own slaves. Everybody but white people own slaves. And the one thing I'm going to say to this, is the same thing I'm going to always say to this. People have owned slaves in various different things, various different societies for many, many moons since this thing started spinning. But what they didn't do was make shoes out of people's skin. They didn't make weird devices to put human bodies in for no other reason than to torture them. That's an American white thing that was done to these slaves in this country by those people. And that is something that is unique to slavery. That ain't just regular slavery. That was torturing people. That was using them like guinea pigs and dogs and making fun of them and creating art pieces with their flesh. This is satanic in nature. It ain't as simple as just using people who don't have anything to build your society. That is not what you were doing. That is not what that was. And that's what y'all was doing. So if you don't want to call it slavery no more, let's call it something else. Let's call it 400 years of torture. Since slavery is something y'all want to mesh together with other empires, did things a certain way. That ain't what you did, America. That ain't what you was on for 400 long ass years. It's not what you were on. And you're damn right you're my enemy because of it. Don't think for one second that I lose sight of what it is that you're actually about, white supremacy. You have always been about rounding up people that were darker than you and putting them in positions to not only be under your thumb, but to feel under your thumb in the process of that. That has been the entire interaction the whole time. And we could try to blur those lines in this moment, in this society, under this empire, but the dynamic still remains. It's always been this way. And it has to change. It has to. Because no matter what y'all did, no matter what we've suffered, we're going to be the same going forward. That's the point. We already are. As I've said in this camera a million times, when I look in the mirror, I see slave and slave master. I got them both in me. I see the features of both. I know they both dead. Which is why I feel so comfortable speaking the way that I do. I harbor the pain of both the suffering and the guilty on my spirit. The DNA of both runs through my veins, as well as a Native American man. All three. And for those who are wondering, my family was owned by Native American slaves. We got paperwork on it. So this is not one of them situations where I'm oblivious to the truth. I just understand exactly what I'm saying to you. It wasn't just about how things went. It was about how we were treated during that process. It wasn't just about building America. It was about letting them get off on us. Mental torture, physical torture, spiritual torture, generational torture, separating people from families for no other reason than just because you could. These details, they don't want us to talk about, think about, or react to. But let me tell you something. I live it every day. And so do a lot of us, even though we're afraid to say it for our own political reasons or our own societal reasons, or because we've been guilt-tripped into believing that our feelings aren't valid and that we're guilty for bringing them up, which I resent to my very core. I feel like I should be able to talk about slavery 7 times a day if I want to. I shouldn't have to hear resistance from any soul. I really believe that. Because of the type of shit that we endured on this land that we stand on. If I was somewhere else, I don't get to talk about it like that. But since we're standing on the land, that shit happened here, everybody here is benefiting off of that? Nah, we need to acknowledge that. There should be a statue as big as the Empire State Building for the spirit of slaves in this goddamn country. Just telling the truth. All these statues y'all got up of all these slave owners and all these evil people didn't do nothing but torture, maim, and kill, and destroy, and steal. I understand they got a statue underwater for us of all the people who jumped overboard who wouldn't take slavery. It's a statue underneath the water. Chain link slaves. That's the only one I know of. That's why I speak the way I speak. So yeah, Kennedy, I laughed. I thought it was funny. I did. That's the strangeness about my brain. I actually laughed at that. I was what's the word? Not charmed. Delighted at his choice of racism. It was funny to me. And I know when he does that, he lets himself be seen a certain way. I knew what comes his way when he does that. This is the cancel culture, buddy. You're not going to be loved for that. Like I said, it's going to be 5 people cheering you and 5 million looking at you like you're an evil racist. So when people want to make themselves look a certain way, they give themselves some rope. We just going to watch. Grab some popcorn. You want to hang yourself? Hang yourself, Kennedy. Have fun, bro. Want to be remembered as a racist in the twilights of your life? Trust me, I won't forget. That's pretty much what I gotta say, man. I offended some people today. Blame your ancestors. I blame mine. And I ain't talking about the black ones. Here's what it is, man. Slavery's real. Racism's real. White supremacy is evil. Here's what it is. We don't have to lie about these things. We can still speak in love with one another without saying lies or molding the truth to make people feel better. I don't talk for today. I talk for forever. Y'all gonna understand that about me. My name is BDF 44. I thank you all for watching.